welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Thanks for coming, first of all, and I appreciate your visit. If you'd hit the like button before you leave today, that helps me out a great deal. I wanted to thank all of my subscribers. I just passed 2,300 subscribers, much to my amazement. Thank you so much for your support. I also wanted to thank the support of my patrons over on Patreon, and if you're interested in becoming a supporter of the channel in that way, or in other ways, check the video description for some of the details about that. Don't forget to check out my website as well. I'll put a link up here for you just in case you've never been there. There's lots of pretty stuff to buy, or just check out some of the stuff I've made. Okay, today we're going to do a wideband overlap ring, and it's going to feature a little emerald cut garnet in the center. And it's going to, by overlap I mean the two pieces of the band are going to cross over like this. And there's going to be some slots in it, and the stone will be kind of centered between the parts that cross over each other. So I made a prototype yesterday, and I figured out some things that I don't want it to do and some things that I do want it to do. And so we'll make some modifications today and see if we can recreate what I had envisioned in my head a little better. So let's get started. I thought since I made a prototype yesterday, I'd show you kind of what I was thinking here. My idea is to have a sheet that goes around like this and then has a stone between it but overlaps slightly this way. This is probably, I can make a usable ring out of this for, to take to a show and try and sell, but I'm not happy with the way everything came out on it, and so I'm going to make some modifications. A couple of things, I'm going to extend these out beyond where they meet, this as well past the bezel like that, and then I think I'm going to try and make the notches that go underneath to be a little more symmetrical in length. And the third thing I'm going to change is I'm going to thicken this sheet over here. So I'm actually going to layer sheet and then taper it because I don't have any thicker sheet than 18 gauge, which is what this is. So the materials I need, a little garnet or some other faceted stone that's a little shape. Let's see how big he is. About 6, I'm guessing by 4 probably. 4 by 6. Like I said, I'm going to use some 18 gauge sheet. And one end of this I'm going to thicken a little bit. Let's see. For the bezel, I'll be using 3/16 inch 28 gauge fine silver bezel strip, and then I'll probably use a little bit of 18 gauge round wire to create a little step inside of there. I think that's about it. As always, I'm using hard silver sheet solder, which is primarily what I use. And then I use a flux, it's a spray-on flux called Mighty-Flux. So I think to start with, let's make a bezel for this garnet, and then we'll go from there. It's kind of nice when I have a day to do a prototype before I start one of these videos, if it's something that I've never done before. Helps me to figure out the challenges I might run into while I'm doing it. With a bezel for something small and angular like this, you don't want to have a lot of play in it, so I'll spend a little time trying to get it pretty close to exact. Thanks everybody for all the nice comments you always make. It's good to know that people are getting something out of some of these. I don't have as much opportunity to teach people in person as I used to. So it's nice to still be able to share the little bit that I know with others. I think we're okay on the size. A little 18 gauge round I'm going to use to build a little step in here. I'm actually going to make 2 layers. After you do a few of these little step things, they get pretty easy. Just takes a little time. You could also use a traditional step bezel. Somebody else called it a bearing bezel the other day. Bearing or something. I had never heard it called that before, but I'm a little sheltered, so. That's a pretty good size. Okay, there's one. Now let's make a second one. So I usually put the lower one in, or put them both in, and then push downwards on the top one to make sure nothing is tilting to the side or anything. You don't want anything soldering in crooked, otherwise you'll end up with a crooked platform for your stone to sit on. Okay, I think we should solder that guy in. So I just usually set it on top of some solder. And I used quite a bit because when I file it down I want it to look like there's no seam whatsoever there. Just file that flat on the bottom. Okay, so let's take a look at the drawing here. So previously I did it in 2 pieces, which I think I'm going to do again. And I cut this piece about that long. And I cut this piece a little bit longer than that, and then I cut it down a slight little bit. However, they need to be a little bit longer than this because I want these to go past. I measured this to be about a size 8, if I remember right, for this right here. And on this one, I ended up with, I need about an extra, I don't know, 3/16 of an inch there. So I'm going to take this, add an extra 3/8 of an inch or so. Probably more than I need. 3/16, oh, it's 3/16, right, on each side? 1, 2, 3/16. Okay, so that would be right into there. Here to add an extra 3/16 on this one. I hope my math is right here. 1, 2, 3. So we'll find out. Okay, so now, remember I was talking about how I didn't like how thin this was going up here. I want it to be a little bit thicker. So I think I'm gonna double this one, or at least part of the way down, so that I get a thicker aspect from the side. So I'm gonna have to cut another piece off of here. I'm trying to get these guys mostly flat, so when I solder them together, I'm nice clean seam. Okay, I'm going to use a lot of solder here. I don't want any crack whatsoever there. Nobody wants an unexpected crack. It's called sweat soldering when you pre-melt some solder in place somewhere so that it's already where it needs to be. I can at least make sure that they're soldered to one of the sheets already. Yeah. And then when I put the other one on top of it, it shouldn't be too hard then to get the solder done nicely. Sometimes when the solder liquefies inside of there, you get a little drift under a piece of sheet when you're doing something like this. So once it's liquefied, you can push it around a bit if you need to. I was getting it super hot, almost to the point where it starts to reticulate, just because I want to make sure that we get a good connection between those two. I'm not seeing any cracks, so I think we're good. The thing is, though, I don't want it to be this thick and then just suddenly transition to this thin, so I'm going to have to taper this. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to spend quite a bit of time filing one surface or the other, because I want it to be thick here and then about this thick on the other end. So I'm going to temporarily bend this. Got a little curve going on to it, so I think we'll just get the file in like this. For some time-consuming job like this, I make use my belt sander. So I went to my garage and I used my belt sander in order to get it kind of thick down here and then gradually taper that thickness there. I may do a little more neatening up. That should work okay. I think I'm going to flatten it back out so I can saw it. Looking at these here, I got my bezel here. I want this to stick out a little bit beyond the bezel this time, like this one, because this is going to be, this piece will be this piece right here. So, if I want to go, I don't know, I think I said 3/16 inch-ish beyond where I meet. Which in millimeters? That seems like a lot to me. I don't think I want to go quite that far. About an eighth, maybe. Now let's find the center this way. It's about 12 and it's about 14 millimeters wide. do it this way. Sometimes it's hard to see little scribed lines on silver, so if you do a little coloring of the metal first, and then a little easier to see the line. I didn't scribe it as straight that time. Okay, but there's the center point right there. So if we go outwards from that, basically it has to surround this thing. So I think I'm going to go about 5 millimeters beyond the stone ends there. That's about where I'm going to cut it out. Okay, let's go do that. Alright, this is pretty thick. We'll see how straight I can keep the cuts. See, I got quite a bit more on this side than that side, so I'm going to have to do some tapering a little bit, probably. Okay, so I'll clean that up with the file a little bit. Okay, so I got it sawed out. I cleaned it up a little bit. Sort of squarish. This is still definitely bigger on this side than it is on that side, but real close to it fitting in there. One of the things I want to do is has to stick out a little bit beyond the other side, so these need to be a little bit narrower. So, and if I want this to taper down to about like that, should I taper this one? Yeah, that's about right. Let's find the center of this side here. I think I gotta go just a little bit off to this side because I did not get this slot centered perfectly, so center them more like that. I'm going like 2 millimeters in from the center here. That looks pretty good. Okay. So I'll get that cut off like that. I'll probably use the saw and then the file, but you don't have to watch me saw every time, I guess. So I'll do that next. Okay, so I got that guy pretty much how he needs to be. I may do a little bit more on that, but I'm going to let it pickle for a while, and then I'll start working on this other side here. Looks like this is still wider on this side than this side is, so I'll probably clean that up a little bit more. I think this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder these guys in the configuration they're going to be in, then I'm going to add the bezel in afterwards. just so I get a nice curve going on there. That way I won't have to deal with this weird little bump thing that happens sometimes there. So see if we can do it that way. Close enough. Okay. Center this. So what I'm doing is I'm just figuring out how narrow it needs to taper down here. So right there. And I think I'm just going to taper it right to the corners up there. And this is still 18 gauge, so I can probably cut this with shears. Okay, now we have to do this side here. We'll need to do some sawing out of that. So that'll be what I do next. You can watch me do that if you want to. Okay, I think I've got the configuration down how I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to do it like this. That way I can see that right in frame. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to get this distance here about the same as that distance over there. So these stick out significantly past the edge of the bezel, but these ones don't. So technically it should be back there, more like that. There's a slightly deeper notch here. So I'm gonna add a little bit there. Right there. And cut that out. See how that looks. Okay, so I cut this a little bit deeper. I think if I line it up just about like that, and then I made a couple of marks here, because these ones go about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or 2 millimeters beyond where the bezel is. That would be about the same there. That would leave a little extra over here, so I think that's pretty close. So that's what I'm gonna do that. Tuning fork effect here while I'm filing. So just about like that. But I think once it starts to get pretty thick here like this, it's going to get super hard to bend it right here. So I think it would be nice if we soldered it while it was bent part of the way. So let's see if we can't, I might have to manually do this, it's pretty thick. How best it would be to solder this. Maybe over a 3rd hand or something. First though, I want to make sure I get the curves to match pretty well like that. I think I'm going to sweat a little bit of solder on here first before we do that. So let's do that. Kind of like that slot ring that I did a while back. So it's got two levels like this. So I'm liking how that looks. It's sticking up better. Now, just have to turn it into a ring and then add that bezel, and we'll see how it goes. So this one that's doubled up is super hard to bend, just so you know. Alright, so this clearly hasn't pickled long enough, but we can go ahead and put the bezel in it before I do the final pickle on it. So let's round this out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit along the edge here. Make sure we can get this square looking. Okay, after a little bit of dremeling, a little bit of filing, I think I'm going to go ahead and solder this in. I put it kind of where I want it to be. You know, this isn't the... I'm not terribly happy with the neatness of how everything came together. I think I can probably improve it with a little more trial and error. But overall, the geometry of the ring I'm pleased with. I just need to solder this in here now. I'm going to make sure it wicks all the way down the whole seam. Now I think we'll pickle it, and I will clean it up and polish it, and then we'll set the stone last. That seems to work best for these videos. So, I'll be back in a bit. This is what it looks like now that it's been cleaned up a bit. I'm rather pleased with it. I think it looks nice. I have filed it down to the level it needed to be for this particular garnet. So it's all ready to set. Let me see if I can get him to sit in there right. Sometimes these little guys try to sit sideways, like kind of diagonally. You push on one side and they pop up on the other, and then you push on that side and they pop up on the other. Endless loop of trying to get the stone to sit right. I'm going to start by gently pushing straight onto the end here. One side. Do the same thing on the other side. Make sure it hasn't moved much. And go from either side slightly. I don't want to push too hard on one side because then it'll pop it up on the other side. And kind of get them gently starting to push against the stone, and even starting to kind of go right over the girdle of the stone. I'm not going to worry about the corners until I feel like it's not moving anymore. Okay, so one of the things I did off camera, and I always do when I'm doing a bezel that has sharp corners like this, is when you try to set that over a sharp cornered stone, this one's not too terribly sharp, but some are, try to bend that, compress that corner material into that tighter space, and there's just too much metal there, so it gets all wrinkly and looks terrible in the corner. So if you file it just a little bit thinner, it's already pretty thin, so you got to be careful not to go too deeply in there. File it a little bit thinner on the corner, and that should allow you to compress that metal more easily over those corners like that. And you'll end up with a lot cleaner looking nice corners. Same way on like a marquee stone or a pear-shaped stone. Once you feel like it's not moving at all anymore, you can start using the rounded outer part here to varnish with. If you're new to metalsmithing, a lot of people use different tools for this stage. Varnishers or bezel pushers or things like that, which are fine. I just always learned to do it this way. It used to be easier when I could see a little better. Okay, I think that's pretty much what we were looking for. So there's our ring. I'll try and get some better pictures in the light booth, and then call it a day. All right, well, that was the overlap ring. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit the like button, and I'd love to have you subscribe to my channel. It's growing. I have a community of people who communicate with me quite a bit, and I appreciate it, and I like the interaction. So if you're getting something out of this, maybe watch a few more videos and then consider subscribing. As I said earlier in the video, I have a Patreon if you're more interested in an interactive sort of experience. Check that out. Or if you don't want to commit to a Patreon membership, you can always buy me a coffee. There's links for those things in the video description, so check those out and if you want to, and if not, that's okay too. But either way, thanks for visiting and happy silversmithing. Take care.